There is a specific kind of rage that only exists in the suburbs. It isn't the hot, red flash of road rage you get when someone cuts you off on the freeway, and it isn't the cold, heavy dread of an IRS audit. It's a beige rage, a slow, creeping, bureaucratic fury that smells like freshly cut grass and high-end cardstock. It's the kind of anger that makes you stand on your front lawn at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, wearing nothing but a ratty bathrobe and knockoff Crocs, staring at a certified letter like it's a declaration of war. Which, to be fair, it was. I held the envelope in my hand. It was thick, expensive. The return address was embossed in a tasteful forest green font that simply read, "The Oaks at Whispering Pines, Homeowners Association." I didn't even have to open it to know what it was about, but I ripped the tab anyway. The sound of the tearing paper echoing entirely too loudly in the morning silence. I pulled out the tri-folded document. It was printed on legitimate linen paper. These people were spending my dues on stationery that felt better than my bedsheets just to tell me I was a disappointment to the neighborhood aesthetic. Notice of violation, the header read in bold capital letters. Code 44B, unapproved exterior materials. Severity, high. I looked up from the paper and stared at my house. It was a nice house, a standard 2-story colonial that looked exactly like the house to my left, and exactly like the house to my right, barring the fact that the guy on the right had a Tesla charger and a smug sense of superiority. I scanned the facade. The siding was clean. The lawn was cut to the mandatory 2.5 inches. The bushes were trimmed into spheres that defied the laws of nature. My eyes drifted up to the roof. It was a roof. It had shingles. They were gray. They kept the water out. In the grand hierarchy of roofs, it was doing a spectacular job. It was barely 6 years old, installed by the previous owner right before I bought the place. It was perfectly functional, unoffensive, and boring. I looked back down at the letter. Dear Mr. Reynolds, it has come to the attention of the Architectural Control Committee that your roofing materials have suffered significant UV degradation, resulting in a color shift from the approved charcoal mist to a non-compliant slate gray. This variance creates a lack of visual cohesion within the subdivision. Please remit a plan for full replacement within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $500, recurring weekly. I blinked. I actually cleaned my ear with my pinky finger and read it again, as if my hearing affected my eyesight. Slate gray, I whispered to the empty street, versus charcoal mist. I looked at the roof again. I squinted. I tilted my head. I tried to see the universe through the eyes of a psychopath. It looked blackish, maybe grayish. It looked like asphalt. If there was a difference between charcoal mist and slate gray, it was a difference visible only to the Hubble telescope, or a woman named Brenda Higgins. Speak of the devil, and she shall appear, usually wearing Lululemon and carrying a bag of organic dog treats. I heard the distinctive click-clack of claws on pavement before I saw her. Mrs. Higgins, the president of the HOA. The woman who once measured my grass with a ruler she kept in her fanny pack. She was power-walking around the bend, her arms pumping like pistons, dragging a golden doodle named Sir Barks-a-Lot, who looked like he wanted to be euthanized just to escape the pace. She saw me. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She offered a tight, grim nod, the kind a warden gives a prisoner who is behaving himself for once. "Mrs. Higgins!" I shouted. It came out louder than I intended. The golden doodle flinched. Higgins slowed down, her Hoka running shoes skidding slightly on the asphalt. She pulled her earbuds out, just one, and looked at me with an expression of polite concern that masked deep, abiding judgment. "Good morning, Jack," she said. Her voice was like aggressive potpourri, floral but chemically induced. "Please tell me you aren't checking the mail in your robe. We have rules about curb appeal before 8 a.m. "I'm not checking the mail, Brenda. I'm checking my sanity." I waved the letter at her. "I just got this via certified mail. I had to sign for it while the postman looked at my hairy legs." "Ah," she said, a small, satisfied smile touching the corners of her mouth. The roof. Yes, the roof, I said, walking down the driveway. I didn't care that my robe was fluttering. I was past shame. Brenda, look at it. Look at the roof. She turned her gaze upward. She didn't just look. She inspected. Her eyes narrowed. She hummed a low, disapproving note. It's really quite jarring, isn't it? She said. Jarring? I choked out a laugh. It's gray shingles, Brenda. It's not neon pink. It's not made of recycled beer cans. It's gray asphalt. It's slate gray, she corrected me, as if I had confused a Chardonnay with a Sauvignon Blanc. The covenants clearly state that all roofs must be charcoal mist. The builder installed charcoal mist 6 years ago, but clearly you haven't been maintaining the UV sealant protocols. There are UV sealant protocols for a roof? I asked. It's a roof. Its entire job is to get baked by the sun, so I don't have to be. Section 9, paragraph C, she recited without missing a beat. Maintenance of exterior integrity. The sun has bleached the pigment, Jack. It's no longer compliant. It disrupts the visual harmony of the street. If we let you keep a slate gray roof, then Bob down the street will want a gunmetal gray roof. And then where does it end? Anarchy, pure anarchy. Anarchy, I repeated, because of the shade of gray. Property values, Jack, she said, dropping the nuclear bomb of suburban arguments. We are protecting your investment. You should be thanking the committee. I am not thanking the committee for asking me to tear off a perfectly good waterproof roof to spend $20,000 on a new one that looks exactly the same. She sighed, the long, suffering sigh of a primary school teacher dealing with a slow child. It doesn't look the same. The albedo is entirely different. Look, Jack, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them to ensure the Oaks at Whispering Pines remains a premier community. You have 30 days. Well, 29 now. The letter was dated yesterday. She popped her earbud back in. Come along, Sir Barks-a-Lot. We're losing our heart rate zone. She marched off, leaving me standing on the driveway, clutching the letter, my knuckles white. I looked back at my house. I looked at the roof. I focused. I really, really tried to see it. I stared until my eyes watered. And finally, I saw it. It was gray. Just gray. I walked back inside, slammed the front door, and went straight to the kitchen. My wife, Sarah, was making coffee. She didn't look up. Who was that? She asked. Higgins, I grumbled, slapping the letter onto the quartz countertop. They want us to replace the roof. Sarah paused, the coffee pot midair. The roof? The one we had inspected 6 months ago? The one the guy said was good for another 15 years? That's the one? Why? Because it's the wrong color. Sarah walked over, picked up the letter, read it, and then looked at me. Is this a joke? I wish. Cheap, $500 a week if we don't fix it. Jack, she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous octave that meant we were discussing finances. We don't have $20,000 for a vanity roof. We're saving for the kids' college. We need to replace the HVAC next year. We are not buying a new roof because Brenda Higgins is bored. I know, I shouted, throwing my hands up. I know that. But you know how they are. They'll put a lien on the house. They'll garnish us. They'll tow my truck just for spite. I paced around the kitchen island. The beige rage was heating up. It was turning into something sharper. I grabbed my laptop and sat down at the table. What are you doing? Sarah asked. I'm reading the bylaws, I said. Every single word. If they want to play by the book, I'm going to memorize the book. I'm going to find a loophole so big I can drive a cement mixer through it. I spent the next 4 hours reading the covenants, conditions, and restrictions of the Oaks at Whispering Pines. It was 140 pages of legal jargon designed to drain the human soul of joy. No flags larger than 3x5. No vegetable gardens visible from the street. No cars parked in the driveway for more than 48 consecutive hours. Trash cans must be retracted by 6 p.m. on pickup day. And there, on page 84, was the roofing section. Roofing material standards. All residential structures must utilize architectural asphalt shingles. Permitted colors are restricted to the black-gray spectrum to maintain aesthetic neutrality. Materials must be uniform in brand and make. Two-tone patterns or highly contrastive designs are prohibited. I stopped. I reread it. Two-tone patterns or highly contrastive designs are prohibited. I leaned back in my chair. Highly contrastive. That was subjective. What is contrast? Black and white is contrast. Red and green is contrast. But what about black and slightly darker black? I kept reading. Variation in shingle tone is permitted provided both tones fall within the approved color palette. See Appendix B, Approved Colors. I flipped to Appendix B. The approved colors were 1, Midnight Black 2, Charcoal Mist 3, Obsidian Shadow 4, Raven's Wing 5, Slate Gray, suspended as of 2024. I stared at the list. Midnight Black and Obsidian Shadow. They sounded like cologne names for teenage boys. I Googled the shingle manufacturer listed as the preferred vendor. I pulled up the swatches on my screen. I held my phone up to the laptop. To the naked eye, on a screen, they looked identical. Just dark, abyssal black. But the specs were interesting. Midnight Black had an albedo, reflectivity, of 0.04. Obsidian Shadow had an albedo of 0.09, meaning, under direct, high noon sunlight, one absorbed slightly more light than the other. A plan began to form in the reptilian part of my brain. It wasn't a good plan. It wasn't a financially responsible plan, but it was a plan that fed the beast of spite living in my chest. If I had to replace the roof, I was going to replace it. I was going to follow every single letter of their law. I would use approved materials, I would use approved colors, I would ensure there was no high contrast visible from the street. But from the sky? I grabbed a notepad. I started sketching. I wasn't an artist, but I knew how pixels worked. A roof is just a giant grid of pixels. A shingle is a pixel. If you treat the roof like a low-resolution monitor, I drew a rectangle. I started shading in squares. Scam. No, that wasn't enough. It needed to be impactful. It needed to be a legacy. HOA. I did the math. The roof surface area was roughly 2,500 square feet. If I used the bundle dimensions, yes, it would fit. It would be massive. Each letter would be 15 feet tall. From the street, standing where Mrs. Higgins stood with her hyperventilating dog, the angle of incidence would make the two blacks blend together. The shimmer would hide the pattern. You would just see a dark, new, compliant roof. But Google Earth satellites take photos from straight down or at a slight angle. They capture the reflectivity. They would see the difference between albedo 0.04 and albedo 0.09. I looked at the estimated cost of a new roof. $18,000. The fine for non-compliance, $500 a week. $26,000 a year. I was going to lose money. I was going to burn my savings. But I looked out the window and saw Mrs. Higgins stopping at my mailbox again, putting a second note on it, probably a reminder that my trash can was 3 inches too far to the left. The rage peaked. It wasn't beige anymore. It was Vanta black. "Sarah!" I yelled. "I found a contractor." "You did?" she shouted back from the living room. "Who?" "I don't know yet," I muttered to myself, dialing the number of a guy named Rusty I found on page 10 of Google search results. There's a Tom, who had a 2-star rating because he argued with city inspectors too much. But he's going to be my new best friend. I met Rusty at a diner called The Yolks on You 3 days later. It was the kind of place that smelled like bacon grease and stale cigarettes, even though smoking had been banned indoors for 20 years. Rusty looked exactly like his name implied. He was a man made of leather, sunburn, and spite. He wore a trucker hat that said OSHA is a suggestion, and his hands looked like they could crush a bowling ball. He was drinking coffee that looked like motor oil. "So," Rusty grunted, not looking up from his scrambled eggs, "you want a roof?" "I want a roof," I agreed, sliding into the booth opposite him. "But not just any roof, Rusty. I have specific requirements." Rusty chewed slowly. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too many homeowners try to get out of paying for flashing. "Listen, buddy, If you want solar shingles, I don't do 'em. If you want that terracotta crap, move to Arizona. I don't want terracotta. I want asphalt. High-grade architectural shingles. I pulled my folder out of my backpack. I laid out the color swatches. I need you to mix 2 different colors. Rusty stopped chewing. He pointed his fork at me. HOA won't like that. They like uniform. They like boring. I know, I smiled. It was a terrifying smile. I could feel it stretching my face. That's the point. Look at these. I pushed the swatches from Midnight Black and Obsidian Shadow toward him. He glanced at them. They're both black. Exactly, but they're different brands, different grain. Look at the grit. Midnight is finer. Obsidian is chunkier. Rusty squinted. He picked up the samples, rubbing his calloused thumb over the grit. He held them up to the diner light, tilting them back and forth. A slow realization dawned on his face. The corners of his eyes crinkled. You want to weave 'em? He asked. Not weave, I said. Pixelate. I slid my graph paper sketch across the table. The grid with the giant block letters, SCAM. Rusty looked at the paper. Then he looked at the swatches. Then he looked at me. For a long moment, there was silence. I thought he was going to throw me out. I thought he was going to tell me I was crazy and that he had real work to do. Instead, he let out a laugh that sounded like a diesel engine turning over in sub-zero temperatures. It was a hacking, wheezing, beautiful sound. You son of a bitch, Rusty wheezed. You hate 'em too? I hate them, I said, with the fire of 1,000 suns. HOA press. Mrs. Higgins, corner of Elm and Oak. Rusty's face darkened. Higgins. He spat the name like a curse. That woman tried to find my truck for leaking oil on the public street while I was working on the Peterson house. It wasn't oil. It was condensation from the AC. She called the EPA on me. She called the cops on my kid for drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. I lied. Well, it was a half lie. She had threatened to. Rusty slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. I'm in. When do we start? There's a catch, I said. We have to be careful. If they catch us doing the pattern, they'll stop work. We have to make it look random during the install. We need to stage the bundles so it looks like we're just grabbing whatever is next. You can't let the crew know what they're spelling until it's too late to stop. My crew doesn't read English good enough to care. Rusty waved a hand. They follow the grid. If I tell them to put bundle A here and bundle B there, they do it. But the layout, that's tricky. We gotta map it out perfectly. I've already mapped it, I said, pulling out a second sheet. I overlaid a grid on the satellite view of my roof. Each square represents 1 bundle of shingles. I've calculated the coverage. We need 40 squares of Midnight and 35 of Obsidian. Rusty took the map. He studied it with the reverence of a general looking at a battle plan. This is beautiful. But the transition, where the roof pitches, the letters will distort. I accounted for the pitch, I said, tapping the paper. I stretched the vertical axis of the letters by 20% to compensate for the slope. From directly above, it'll look flat. Rusty looked at me with genuine respect. You're an engineer? Accountant, I said. But rage is a powerful motivator. All right, Mr. Accountant, Rusty grinned, revealing a gold tooth I hadn't noticed before. It's gonna cost you. Custom labor. Pain in the ass sorting. And I want half up front in cash. Done. And, Rusty added, leaning in, when she comes out to scream at us, and she will, I want you to let me handle her. Deal. We shook hands. His grip nearly broke my fingers. The next 2 weeks were a blur of logistical covert ops. We had to order the shingles from 2 different suppliers so the delivery trucks didn't look suspicious arriving at the same time. Second, I had to hide the Obsidian Shadow bundles in the garage immediately so Higgins wouldn't inspect the labels and see they were different brands. I received 3 more letters from the HOA during this time. Fine hash 1, $500. Non-compliance. Fine hash 2, $500. Continued non-compliance. Fine hash 3, $500. Aggravated non-compliance. I paid them. I wrote the checks with a smile. I mailed them in envelopes that I had lightly perfumed with cheap cologne, just to be petty. On the morning of the install, the air was crisp. It was 6:55 a.m. Rusty's crew rolled up in 3 battered Ford F-250 AS. They didn't park in the driveway. They parked on the street, taking up exactly the legal amount of space, but positioned specifically to make it difficult for anyone else to navigate the cul-de-sac. At 7 a.m. on the dot, the permissible start time for construction noise, Rusty fired up an air compressor. It sounded like a jet engine taking off inside a metal trash can. I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching. Curtains twitched across the street. Blinds snapped open next door. And then, right on cue, the front door of the Higgins residence flew open. She came out in a silk kimono, clutching her phone. She didn't walk. She stormed. She marched right up to the edge of my lawn, where Rusty was currently throwing a bundle of shingles onto the roof with a thud that shook the neighborhood. "Excuse me!" she shrieked. "Excuse me!" Rusty looked down from the ladder. He slowly lowered his sunglasses. "Morning, ma'am. Beautiful day for roofing." "It is 7 o'clock in the morning," she yelled. "People are sleeping." "City ordinance says 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Rusty shouted back. "We're on the clock." "This is excessive noise," she pointed at the compressor. "That machine is faulty. It exceeds the decibel limits." "It's calibrated to 85 decibels, ma'am," Rusty lied smoothly. "Standard operating volume. Maybe your ears are sensitive." I stepped in, playing the role of the beleaguered homeowner. "Brenda, please. I'm just doing what you asked. I'm replacing the roof. You wanted it done in 30 days. I'm trying to comply." She whipped her head toward me. "You are using unapproved contractors. I don't see a permit in the window." "Permit's on the door," I pointed. It was taped there, fully legal. "And the materials?" She narrowed her eyes at the pallets of shingles sitting in the driveway. "Are those charcoal mist?" My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment. The shingles in the driveway were the midnight black ones. The obsidian shadow ones were hidden in the garage, to be brought out only as needed. "Go check," I said, bluffing. She marched over to the pallet. She peered at the label. "Certainteed, midnight black." She stood up, looking disappointed. "Midnight black? That wasn't the original spec." "It's on the approved list, Brenda," I said, reciting Appendix B. "Option number 1. She huffed. She couldn't argue. It was on the list. "Well," she sniffed, "make sure they clean up every nail. If I find one nail on the street, it's a tire hazard fine. $200 per occurrence." "We'll use a magnet, ma'am," Rusty called out. "Don't you worry your pretty little head." I saw a vein bulge in her forehead. She turned on her heel and marched back to her house. "She's gonna call the cops," Rusty said, climbing down the ladder. "You think?" "I know," Rusty spat. "Give it an hour. She's gonna claim we're menacing her, or that the compressor is a bomb. Seen it 1,000,000 times." "What do we do?" Rusty grinned. "We work faster." The crew swarmed the roof like ants. They were tearing off the old gray shingles with a violence that felt personal. Rip, crash, rip, crash. Debris rained down into the dumpster. It was glorious. But Rusty was right. At 8:15 a.m., a squad car rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac. I sighed. I put my coffee down. I walked out to meet the officer. It was Officer Miller. I knew him because he had responded to the chalk incident last summer. He looked tired. He looked like a man who regretted every life choice that led him to being a peacekeeper in a neighborhood where the biggest crime was leaving your garage door open for 20 minutes. "Morning, Jack," Miller said, leaning out the window. "Morning, Officer Miller." "Let me guess." Miller nodded toward the Higgins house. "Roofing too loud?" "Apparently." "She called 911, Miller said, rubbing his temples. "She said, and I quote, 'There is a gang of aggressive men destroying property and wielding hammers in a threatening manner.'" I looked at the roof. One of Rusty's guys, a teenager named Kevin, was eating a sandwich with one hand and ripping shingles with the other. "They're roofers, Miller. Hammers are kind of their thing," Miller sighed. He turned off the car. "I gotta do the song and dance, Jack. I gotta talk to the foreman." "I gotta tell her I investigated. You know the drill." "Come on in," I said. "Coffee?" "Please," he said. "Black like my soul." The interaction was brief. Miller told Rusty to keep it down if possible, which isn't possible. Rusty said, "Yes, sir, officer." Miller walked over to Brenda's house, spent 10 minutes listening to her scream, then drove away. As soon as the cop car rounded the corner, Rusty looked at me from the roof. He gave a thumbs up. "Phase 1 complete," he shouted. "Tear down is done, now we paint." He whistled to his crew. "All right, boys, open the garage. Bring out the special stock." This was it. The point of no return. We were about to permanently etch a 4-letter insult onto the top of my house, and there was no turning back. The special stock, the pallets of obsidian shadow, were wheeled out of the garage on dollies, hidden under tarps until the last possible second. To anyone watching from the street, it looked like just another load of black asphalt rectangles. To me, it looked like ammunition. Rusty stood at the bottom of the ladder, holding the clipboard with my grid map. It looked like a cross-stitch pattern for anarchists. "All right, listen up," Rusty barked at his crew. "This ain't your standard lap and tap. We are following the grid. Row 1, bundle A. Row 2, bundle B. You see an X on the chart, you switch to the shadow stock. You mess this up, and we gotta tear it off. Comprende?" The crew nodded. They didn't care about the politics of suburban warfare. They just wanted to get paid and go home. But there was a spark in the foreman's eye. A guy named Eduardo. He looked at the grid, then he looked at the roof, then he looked at the layout of the letters. He traced the shape of the S with his finger. He looked at me and grinned. "As una palabra? A word?" "Sí," I said, putting a finger to my lips. "Secreto." Eduardo laughed. "Muy bueno. We make it good." The installation was a high-wire act of anxiety. I sat in a lawn chair in the garage with the door open, pretending to clean my golf clubs, but really I was acting as air traffic control. Every time Mrs. Higgins' drapes moved, I coughed loudly. Every time a car slowed down, I held my breath. The problem wasn't the color difference. As we'd hoped, down on the ground, the difference between midnight black and obsidian shadow was negligible. It was the texture. If you stared hard enough, you could see that the obsidian shingles had a slightly coarser grain, a way of catching the light that made them look dull compared to the sheen of the midnight ones. "Hey!" Rusty shouted from the roof. "Boss, we got a bogey!" I ran out to the driveway. Walking down the sidewalk was Kevin, the guy from 3 doors down. Kevin was 30-something, worked in tech, and his entire personality revolved around craft beer and his DJI Phantom 4 Pro drone. He was holding the drone case. My stomach dropped into my shoes. If Kevin launched that drone now, while the pattern was fresh and the sun was high, he'd see it. He'd see the giant HOA forming on the left side of the roof. "Hey, Jack," Kevin called out, waving a controller. "Saw the crew. Thought I'd get some B-roll for the neighborhood Facebook group. People love seeing home improvements, right?" "Kevin!" I shouted, sprinting down the driveway, waving my arms like I was trying to land a plane. "Stop! Don't launch!" Kevin paused, looking confused. "What? Why? It's public airspace, Jack." It's, I scrambled for a lie. My brain was firing on all cylinders. "It's proprietary technology." "Proprietary technology?" Kevin laughed. "It's a roof, Jack. It's asphalt." No, listen." I lowered my voice, looking around conspiratorially. "These aren't normal shingles. These are Tesla prototypes. Solar thermal capture, experimental. I signed an NDA. If images get out before the patent is pending, I could get sued for millions. Rusty up there. He's not just a roofer. He's a certified installer for Musk." I pointed at Rusty. Rusty, seeing me point, scratched his belly and spit a glob of tobacco juice into the dumpster. Kevin looked at Rusty, then back at me. He looked skeptical. "That guy works for Tesla?" "He's deep cover," I whispered. "Look, Kevin, I know you want the footage, but I can't let you fly. Interference. The shingles emit a magnetic field. It might scramble your GPS. You could lose the drone." Kevin clutched his drone case tighter. "Seriously? Would I lie to you? Remember what happened to the last guy who flew over Area 51? I'm just trying to save your hardware, man." Kevin looked at the roof, then at his expensive toy. The threat of losing his drone was stronger than his desire for content. Whoa, okay. Thanks for the heads up. Magnetic field, huh? That's wild. Super wild, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. Maybe keep it grounded for a few weeks? Until the field settles? You got it. Good looking out, Jack. Kevin walked away, looking at my roof with newfound awe. I exhaled so hard I nearly collapsed. Nice save, Rusty called down. Musk? Really? Shut up and nail, I said. By day 3, the roof was 80% done. The S and the C were finished. The A was taking shape. The M was the finale. The stress was manifesting physically. I was grinding my teeth so hard my jaw clicked, but the real enemy wasn't the drone or the cops anymore. It was the geometry of the dumpster. The dumpster, a massive, rusted steel container, was sitting in my driveway. It was an eyesore. I knew it was an eyesore. But it was a necessary evil. I was inside eating a sandwich when I saw her. Mrs. Higgins. She was back. And this time she had a weapon. A yellow Stanley tape measure. I watched through the blinds as she approached the dumpster. She hooked the end of the tape to the curb and walked backward to the edge of the metal bin. She squinted at the numbers. She stood up, a look of triumph washing over her face like a holy light. She pulled out her phone and dialed. My phone rang 10 seconds later. This is Jack, I answered. Jack, this is Brenda Higgins. I can see you, Brenda. You're standing in my driveway. Then you can see that your waste receptacle is in violation of Section 12, Paragraph D, she said, her voice dripping with bureaucratic ecstasy. Dumpsters must be set back a minimum of 15 feet from the curb line to ensure emergency vehicle clearance and aesthetic sight lines. I'm measuring 14 feet 10 inches. 2 inches, I said flatly. You're calling me about 2 inches. Rules are rules, Jack. If I let you have 2 inches, everyone will want 2 inches. Move it back, or I'll have to fine you for an unapproved obstruction. That's $200 a day. I hung up. I walked outside. Problem? Rusty asked from the ladder. She wants the dumpster moved back 2 inches. Rusty looked at the dumpster. Then he looked at the driveway. Boss, if we move it back 2 inches, the rear door won't open. It'll hit your garage door. You won't be able to get your car out. I know, I said. A dark calmness settled over me. Move it. You sure? Move it back 3 feet. Put it right up against the garage door. Block me in completely. But where are you going to park? On the street, I smiled. Right in front of her house. Rusty signaled the driver who was idling nearby to reposition the bin. The truck roared, the hydraulics whined, and the dumpster slammed down 3 feet closer to the house. It was now fully compliant with the setback rule. It also rendered my driveway completely useless. That night I took my Ford F-150, which had a slightly noisy muffler and was desperately in need of a wash, and I parked it on the street. But I didn't just park it anywhere. I parked it directly opposite Mrs. Higgins' driveway. Our street was narrow, perfectly legal for two-way traffic, but tight. By parking opposite her driveway, I made it geometrically impossible for her to back her oversized Cadillac Escalade out without doing a 10-point Austin Powers turn. I watched from the window the next morning. 7:30 a.m. Higgins' garage opens. The Escalade reverses. She checks the camera. She sees my truck. She stops. She pulls forward. She turns the wheel. She reverses. She gets stuck. She honks. I sipped my coffee. I didn't move. She got out of the car. She stormed up to my door. She rang the bell. I didn't answer. She rang again. I opened the door, wearing my robe. Good morning, Brenda. Lovely day. Your truck, she shrieked. It's blocking my egress. Is it? I stepped out and looked. It's parked legally on the public street, Brenda. 18 inches from the curb. Not blocking a hydrant. Not blocking a driveway. I can't get out. That sounds like a turning radius issue, not a parking issue, I said innocently. Maybe you should have bought a smaller car? Or maybe you should petition the city to widen the roads? Oh wait, the HOA voted against that last year to preserve the historic canopy of the trees. Move it. I can't, I shrugged. My driveway is blocked. By the dumpster, which is exactly 15 feet from the curb, per your request. Her face turned a shade of purple that I didn't think existed in nature. She stared at me. She stared at the dumpster. She realized, in that moment, that she had played herself. "You are a petty little man," she hissed. "And you have a compliant neighborhood," I replied. "Have a nice day." She spent 10 minutes maneuvering her car out, curbing her rims twice. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. 4 days later, the roof was done. Rusty's crew swept the lawn with magnets. They pressure-washed the driveway. They even cleaned the gutters. The roof looked dark. From the street, it was a monolithic slab of black asphalt. To verify the installation, the Architectural Control Committee, ACC, had to do a final sign-off. This was the boss battle. The committee consisted of Brenda Higgins, a guy named Bob, who slept through meetings, and Karen, yes, her real name, and she lived up to it. They stood on the sidewalk with clipboards. I stood with them, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Well," Bob said, squinting up, "it's definitely black." "It's midnight black," I said quickly. "Certainteed Landmark Series. Top of the line." Karen adjusted her glasses. "It looks a bit textured. Is that patchiness?" She pointed vaguely toward the area that was the bottom leg of the letter A. "That's the architectural depth," Rusty stepped in, wearing a clean shirt for the occasion. "See, these high-end shingles have a shadow line built in. It creates a 3D effect to mimic slate. That variance, you see? That's quality. That's what you paid for." "It mimics slate?" Brenda asked, her ears perking up at the word slate. Slate was classy. Slate was expensive. "Yes, ma'am," Rusty lied. "It's the estate look. Very popular in the Hamptons right now." "The Hamptons," Brenda repeated. She looked at the roof with new eyes. Suddenly, the patchiness wasn't a defect. It was a status symbol. "Well, if it's the style—" "It is," I said. "I just wanted to make sure the home value reflected the neighborhood standards." Brenda scribbled something on her clipboard. She walked back and forth, viewing it from different angles. The letters were stretched and distorted by the slope. From the ground, they were invisible. You had to be at least 200 feet in the air to see the pattern cohere. "It's dark," she concluded. "It's uniform. It's not that hideous gray." She looked at me. "I'm approving it, Jack. But let this be a lesson. Maintenance is key." "Understood, Brenda." She signed the form. Certificate of Compliance, issued. I took the paper. I wanted to frame it. I wanted to laminate it and beat her to death with it. But instead, I just nodded. "Thank you for your diligence," I said. They walked away. Rusty waited until they were around the corner before he let out a breath. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." "We're not done yet," I said, looking up at the sky. "Now we wait for the birds." The problem with revenge that relies on satellite imagery is that Google does not work on your schedule. The roof was finished in October. The leaves fell. The snow came. The snow melted. The flowers bloomed. For 6 months. I lived with a secret that burned a hole in my pocket. Every time I drove up to my house, I suppressed a giggle. Every time Mrs. Higgins walked by and nodded approvingly at my Hampton-style roof, I had to bite the inside of my cheek until it bled. I checked Google Earth every single morning. Log in, search address, zoom in. Nothing. The image was still dated from 2 years ago. The old gray roof was still there in the digital world. I checked Apple Maps. Nothing. I checked Bing Maps. Desperation does strange things to a man. Nothing. It was agony. I had spent $20,000 on a joke that nobody could see. Was I crazy? Had I just improved my home value and complied with the HOA like a good little sheep, while convincing myself I was a revolutionary? Doubt started to creep in. Maybe the contrast wasn't enough. Or maybe the satellite cameras wouldn't pick up the difference in albedo. Maybe the resolution would blur the pixels into a muddy mess. Then came the Zillow incident. It was July. Hot, humid, the kind of heat that makes asphalt shimmer. The neighbors across the street, the Petersons, put their house on the market. They hired a fancy real estate firm, the kind that uses drone photography for the virtual tour. I was at work when I got the alert. New listing, 742 Oak Lane. I opened the listing. I clicked through the photos. Kitchen, bath, living room. Boring. Then, the aerial shot. It was a drone photo taken from about 100 feet up, looking down at the Petersons' house. But in the top right corner of the frame, blurry and out of focus, was my roof. I zoomed in. My heart stopped. The angle was oblique. It wasn't a top-down view. But even at that angle, with the sun hitting it from the south, I saw it. It looked like a shadow, a weird geometric shadow. S-C. It was there. It was faint, but it was there. I called Rusty. Rusty, the Peterson listing, go look at it. Hang on, he said. I heard typing. Holy hell, is that the S? That's the S, I said, my voice trembling. It works, Rusty whispered. The physics works. But it's not enough, I said. It's blurry. We need the satellite. We need the vertical pass. The waiting became an obsession. I started tracking satellite orbital paths. I joined forums for GIS enthusiasts. I learned about refresh rates and pass bands. I became the weird guy at parties who asked people when they thought Google updated their cache. And then it happened. It was a Tuesday in September. Almost a full year since the letter. I was sitting at my desk at work doing my daily ritual. Google Earth. Refresh. The screen flickered. The trees looked different. The cars in the driveways had changed positions. The image was sharper, crisper. My hand shook as I scrolled to my street. I zoomed in on the oaks at Whispering Pines. I found Mrs. Higgins' house. I found the Peterson house. I moved the cursor to my house. I stopped breathing. There it was, crystal clear, high definition. The sun must have been directly overhead when the satellite passed, because the contrast was stark. The midnight black shingles absorbed the light like a void. The obsidian shadow shingles reflected just enough glare to appear a lighter, dusty charcoal. The letters popped against the background like they were written in white paint. And HOASCAM. It was perfect. It spanned the entire width of the house. The M took up the entire space over the garage. The font was blocky, 8-bit, and undeniable. I stared at it. Tears welled up in my eyes. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever created. It was my Sistine Chapel. I took a screenshot. I took another screenshot. I zoomed out to see if it was visible from a neighborhood view. It was. It was the most dominant feature of the cul-de-sac. I leaned back in my chair and started to laugh. I laughed until my coworkers stood up and looked over the cubicle walls. I laughed until I was wheezing. "Jack?" my boss asked, walking by. "You okay?" "I'm great, Gary." I wiped a tear from my eye. "I'm fantastic. I really love technology." I had the weapon. Now I had to figure out how to detonate it. I couldn't just email it to them. That was too direct. It needed to be organic. It needed to be discovered. I created a burner account on Nextdoor, the social media platform where neighbors go to complain about suspicious vans and coyote sightings. I named the account Eagle Eye 22. I posted the screenshot. Subject: Has anyone noticed this on Google Earth? Body: I was looking up directions to a party in the Oaks, and I zoomed in on this house. Is this graffiti on the roof? LOL. I hit post. Then I sat back and waited for the world to burn. The reaction time of a suburban neighborhood on social media is faster than the speed of light. I posted it at 10:14 a.m. By 10:20 a.m., there were 3 comments. Susan M., "What is that? Is that real?" Tom B., "That's the Reynolds house. I walk past there every day." Karen, the actual Karen. "Oh my God." It says scam. It says HOA scam. By 10:45 a.m., the thread had 150 comments. People were logging onto Google Earth themselves to verify it. They were posting their own screenshots. "It's real. I'm looking at it right now." This is legendary. Wait, didn't Higgins make him replace that roof last year? He spent $20K to insult the board? Hero! By noon, it had jumped containment. Someone took a screenshot of the Nextdoor thread and posted it to Reddit. It hit the front page of r Funny, car malicious compliance, and r Mad Lads simultaneously. Man installs $20,000 spite roof visible from space. My phone started blowing up. Texts from friends. Dude, is that your house? Jack, you absolute legend. Bro, CNN is talking about it. But the call I was waiting for came at 2 p.m. Jack Reynolds. This is the board. It was Brenda. Her voice was trembling, not with fear, but with a rage so pure it vibrated the speaker. Hey Brenda, what's up? You know what is up, she shrieked. The internet, the pictures, the obscenity on your roof. Obscenity? I asked, feigning shock. Brenda, I don't know what you're talking about. My roof is black. You signed off on it. It says scam, Jack. It says HOA scam in 20-foot letters. That sounds like a glitch, Brenda. A pixelation error. You know how satellites are. Sometimes they distort things. Do not play games with me. We have an emergency meeting tonight at 7 p.m. You will be there, and you will explain why you have vandalized our community. I'll be there, I said. Can I bring cookies? She hung up. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse. Usually these meetings had an attendance of 4 people. Tonight, it was standing room only. There were neighbors I had never met. There were teenagers live streaming on TikTok. There was a guy selling popcorn. I walked in with Sarah. She looked terrified, but also weirdly proud. She squeezed my hand. Don't get us sued, she whispered. No promises. I took my seat in the front row. The board sat behind a folding table. Brenda looked like she had aged 10 years in 6 hours. Her eyes were bloodshot. Order! She banged a gavel that she had definitely brought from home. Order! The room quieted down. Mr. Reynolds, she began, standing up and pointing a shaking finger at me. You stand accused of violating Section 4, Paragraph A, offensive signage, Section 9, exterior modifications, and Section 1, general decency. She projected the Google Earth image onto a screen behind her. The crowd gasped. Then someone in the back started clapping. Brenda glared them into silence. You have humiliated this association, she said. We demand you repaint the roof immediately. I stood up. I buttoned my blazer. I walked to the front. Mrs. Higgins, I said calmly, I object to the accusation. Object? It's right there. She pointed at the screen. That, I said, pointing at the screen, is a digital artifact, a trick of the light, an optical illusion caused by the angle of the sun and the specific refractive index of the asphalt granules. I pulled out a document. Here is the Certificate of Compliance, signed by you, Brenda, dated October 14th. You inspected the roof, you approved the materials, you confirmed that from the street, the only vantage point that legally constitutes curb appeal, the roof is uniform and compliant. I didn't know you were writing messages for astronauts, she yelled. The bylaws, I continued, raising my voice, do not regulate the view from low Earth orbit. They regulate the view from the street. Does the roof look like that from the street? No, but... Does it look like that from your bedroom window? No, but... Then I am compliant. I slammed the paper on the table. I used approved materials. I used approved colors. If the sun hits them in a way that reveals the truth about this organization, well, maybe that's just a sign from God. The room erupted. People were cheering. He's right, someone shouted. The bylaws don't cover space. This HOA is a scam, another voice yelled. You fined me for a garden gnome. Brenda pounded the gavel. You are fined. We are retroactively fining you. $10,000 for vandalism. You can't fine me for a roof you approved, I countered. I'll see you in court, and I'll bring the media. In fact, I turned to the back of the room. Hey, Channel 5, did you get that? A cameraman and a reporter, who had slipped in during the chaos, turned on their bright light. The reporter, a sharp-looking woman with a microphone, stepped forward. Mrs. Higgins, the reporter asked, is it true that this homeowner spent $20,000 to comply with your rules, and now you're punishing him because the internet finds it funny? Brenda looked at the camera. She looked at the crowd. She looked at the giant word, scam, projected behind her. She opened her mouth like a fish out of water. No sound came out. She sat down. The meeting descended into anarchy. The board members started arguing with each other. The neighbors started chanting, "Dissolve! Dissolve!" I walked over to the reporter. "Hi, I'm Jack. I'm the guy with the roof." "Jack," she smiled. "Great roof. Can we get an interview on the lawn tomorrow?" "Absolutely." The fallout was nuclear. The story ran on the local news that night. It ran on national news the next morning. Good Morning America did, a segment called Rage Roofing. Tourists started showing up. People were flying drones over the neighborhood constantly. It sounded like a swarm of angry bees 24/7. The HOA tried to sue me. They really did. They hired a lawyer who sent me a terrifying cease and desist letter. I hired a lawyer named Saul. Not really, but he had the energy. We countersued for harassment and selective enforcement, but the lawsuit never made it to court because the neighborhood revolted. The publicity had brought to light all the petty tyranny of the Higgins administration. The garden gnome incident, the chalk sidewalk fiasco, the wrong shade of mulch scandal. A special election was called. The turnout was 98%. Brenda Higgins was voted out in a landslide. The entire board was replaced by a group of dads whose platform was, "Leave everyone alone and drink beer." The first act of the new board was to rewrite the bylaws. Clause 1, roofs must keep water out, that's all. My roof became a local landmark. Pilots flying into the nearby regional airport reportedly used it as a visual waypoint. Turn left at the scam house. I didn't paint over it, I kept it. 2 years later, I was sitting on my front porch. It was a Saturday. I was drinking a beer. A car pulled up. It was Brenda Higgins. She hadn't been president for 2 years, and she had aged. She looked smaller, defeated. She rolled down her window. "Jack," she said. "Brenda." "I'm moving," she said. "Florida, going to a condo community." "Congratulations," I said. "They have HOAs down there too, you know. You'll love it." She looked at the roof. She sighed. "You know, it really is a nice installation. The quality is excellent." "Rusty does good work," I said. "It spells scam," she murmured, shaking her head. "I still can't believe you did that." "It was expensive," I admitted, "but it was cheaper than therapy." She almost smiled. Almost. Then she rolled up her window and drove away. I sat there for a while, watching the sunset. I pulled out my phone and opened Google Earth. I zoomed in on my house. There it was, eternal, digital, indelible, HOA scam. I zoomed out. I looked at the neighborhood, the city, the state, the globe. Somewhere up there, a satellite was whizzing by at 17,000 miles per hour, taking pictures of my spite. I raised my beer to the sky. "Smile," I said, and I took a sip.